Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Lord Marshall Memorial Lecture. The School of Business, Economics and Informatics holds 4 memorial lectures a year to honour distinguished people associated with the school and with the college. And tonight it's the Lord Marshall Lecture. Lord Marshall was a distinguished Chair of Governors of Birkbeck for many years, and he was also, of course, a very distinguished business leader. And we're delighted to have a different format for tonight, which is a conversation. So just to set the scene, we are in Montmartre in 1961 as portrayed by in the Tony Hancock film Rebel, much dismissed these days, but actually probably his best one. And we are eavesdropping on a conversation on this corner table between 2 distinguished people. But to introduce them, I would like to introduce the Master of Birkbeck, Professor David Latchman.
Thank you, Philip. As you say, it is a different format this year, and we can see that as we look around. But some things remain the same. And one thing, of course, is our desire to honour the memory of Lord Marshall. We're unfortunately deprived of the company of Lady Janet Marshall today. She is a little unwell and sends her regrets, and I'm sure we will send her our best wishes. Colin, I think I'm quoted somewhere in the brochure as saying that Colin was a wonderful chairman, and indeed he was. And during the period that he was chairman, we went through all sorts of crises. Many of you will remember the government's decision to withdraw funding for students doing second round first degrees, which in one stroke cost us 40% of our teaching funding, and Colin was an enormous tower of strength at that time. So I must say, when I received the latest government cut letter this morning of 2.5%, it sort of makes one think, oh well, 2.5%, not exactly 40%. If you survive 40%, probably you can survive everything. And so he was an absolutely wonderful chairman, and his legacy lives on because, actually, I was only reflecting this morning, many of our supporters, many of our donors who continue to support and give us funds and help us in other ways were people who were introduced to Birkbeck via Colin Marshall, who would call me in the morning and say, I was at a reception last night, I met so-and-so, he could support or she could support Birkbeck, they're waiting for your call. Or even more subtly, he would say, they won't see you without me, because you're not important enough, obviously, and therefore you need to set up that I can come along as well and influence them. So he really was a wonderful chairman. Another thing that actually stays the same, of course, is the distinction of the guest that we have for the Lord Marshall lecture. We had Willie Walsh, the chairman of British Airways, who started things off, followed by David Bernstein, the former chairman of the FA, and we're privileged to have with us Lord Bilimoria, who, like Colin Marshall, is a distinguished business entrepreneur. You have, I think, on the table the Cobra beer. It's often that we can sample the products of the business during the Lord Marshall. We didn't have footballs for the Football Association or little aeroplanes for our first one, but we do have Cobra beer, so do enjoy that. And of course, he has an international flavour in terms of his business, particularly British Indian links, which something that Lord Marshall again was very involved with in international business. Lord Marshall had a passion for London, and I know Lord Bilimoria has that. He probably doesn't remember, but we were on the Promote London Council together for a very short period, one of Boris's ideas of promoting London. So we're very privileged to have him with us together with Lady Bilimoria this evening. And of course, we're privileged to have as our sort of interviewer, interlocutor, Joanna Burke. I don't wish to dwell on Joanna's academic distinction. Those who know will know that becoming a Fellow of the British Academy, as she did last year, is an enormous distinction. She's written a whole series of books, and of course, she is the media personality. Her latest effort, I think, is called Drills, Dentures and Dentistry, an oral history. And she can make a pun like that. I can say that I hope, Joanna, you won't be too probing in the discussion we're going to have with Lord Bilimoria. And I think on that note, I will leave the two of you to entertain and inform us in this conversation, which I believe is on the higher education and its role in developing enterprise in students. So,
Well, I've already promised that I'm not going to cause you any pain. No, I'm going to probe, but gently, very gently. And we have an anaesthetic here, or analgesic at least, which I'm really pleased that we have, because I have a confession to make. When I came to this country 20-something years ago, this was the first beer that I drank, and I have been drinking it ever since. It is fantastic, not only with Indian food, but also with anything spicy. So one of the reasons why I agreed to come and have this conversation is because I knew that it would be followed by something rather splendid. So I'm really, really thrilled actually to meet you. I guess what I really want to start with is your background, your history. I mean, your father was a very distinguished military officer in India. I believe, at least from your book, which I'm taking as the Bible here, that when you went to him as a young man in the early 1980s, and you asked for his advice for your new business venture, that he said, the important thing is that when you're asked to do something, you have to do it, and then do something even more above that. Is that the case? And if so, sort of how has his advice sort of encouraged you or been an influence on your career?
Firstly, thank you for your support with Cobra Beer.
I've kept your business flourishing.
I was very, when you're asked, who were your influences or who inspired you, I've been very lucky in that there have been two individuals in particular who've been a great inspiration to me in my career, in my business career. One of them was my father. And I was able to, through him, see leadership at close quarters. He was, from the time I was born, I was brought up in that military environment. He was commissioned at the Gurkhas. Well, this is a very special year because this is the 200th anniversary of the Gurkhas serving in the British and Indian armies. And my father's regiment, his battalion, 2nd, 5th Gurkha Rifles Frontier Force, used to be the Royal Gurkha Rifles before it went to the Indian Army after India's independence. That battalion was awarded 3 Victoria Crosses in the Second World War. 1 battalion, 3 Victoria Crosses. So it's called the VC Battalion. And one of my father's generals, Field Marshal Manik Shaw, he had this saying that he said, if a man says that he is not afraid of dying, he's either lying or he's a Gurkha. So their bravery is legendary.
Yes.
And so I was able to, that was a great influence. And my father's, the way he dealt with people, he had the distinction of commanding his battalion in war, which any army officer would dream of. It's not a nice thing, but that's what they're trained to do. And he fought in the liberation of Bangladesh in the 1971 Indo-Pakistan War, when Bangladesh was created. And sadly lost a lot of people, and lost a lot of men, officers, people I was brought up with as a child. I remember it very clearly. So it's the horrible side of it that I also was able to see and hear from him. And then, of course, when he became Commander-in-Chief of the Central Army, he had 350,000 people under his command. Now, British Army, sadly, today, won't even fill Wembley Stadium. We're 82,000, which I think is negligent. So those leadership qualities were great. I mean, the way he would deal with people, for example, when we'd be home from school or university, visiting my father in a gathering, he'd call a young officer and he would say, "Makaran, I want you to meet this young man. Do you know what he did yesterday? He did this and he did this and he did that. He is brilliant." And people were listening to this, and you could see this person just standing warm and the chest coming out and really proud and in front of everybody. And the amount that did for that person and for everybody else around, it was brilliant. And he'd do that all the time. And then I'd walk into his office and the desk would be absolutely clear. Only the paper he was looking at. And he always said, "He'd take me to, I don't see that. All those things piled up, not the way to do it. Just clear desk, clear mind." And then he also believed in having fun. He said you need not just an efficient team, but a happy and an efficient team. So these were lessons I learned from how he dealt with people, his attitude, and very lucky.
So it sounds like your father made you into a warrior, like he was. He made you into someone who is super efficient. He taught you those valuable lessons. He had fun. I believe that when you were at university, you also had fun. Sport, I'm thinking of here. You went to Sydney Sussex College in Cambridge. Tell us about your experiences in Cambridge as a young man, because not only, of course, did you obviously study very hard there, but also you had fun in terms of sports. You also actually did a lot of business when you were a student in Cambridge, importing, for example, polo sticks and things like that from India. So tell me about your experience as a university student and what that has done for your career as a businessman.
Well, I was very lucky. I got a lucky break and went to university in India when I was 16, just like Gordon Brown did. But that's all I have in common with Gordon Brown. So, and then I graduated at 19. I was actually far too young, but I do remember it was very tough. But I was just focused on just getting really good academic results. So those 3 years, except for the last year when I actually in Hyderabad when I had a really good time, I just worked because I had to catch up with everybody else, and I really wanted to get the best possible result, which I just about did. And then I qualified as a chartered accountant here with Ernst & Young, started off as Arthur Young and Ernst & Young in the city. And then when I went to Cambridge, I was not even officially a mature student. I was still only 24. And I did my law degree.
I realize you're so young.
But my objective at Cambridge was, I wanted to study law. I considered becoming a barrister, not a solicitor, because I'd already qualified chartered accountant. Solicitor would be too similar. So I went to the inns, I attended court, I attended the dinners, I did, threw myself into them, and I realized I don't want to be a barrister because it would be too specialized. I needed more blue sky. Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to experience Cambridge in its entirety, which I was lucky I did. So I threw myself into political life there, in the union, and also into sport for my college, but also for the university. And one was I played polo for the university. And while I was at Cambridge, I came up with my business idea. Because I would go to Indian restaurants regularly, I would go to pubs regularly, and I found that I loved, I absolutely loved, I've always loved beer, but I hated the fizzy lagers in this country. And I found the lagers were on the whole bland and tasteless and fizzy and bloating and harsh, and they were terrible. I can't name them, but you know the ones I mean.
I know some of the ones you mean.
Probably the worst lager in the world.
Yeah.
Or reassuringly cheap.
So, which is important if you're a student.
So I just was not impressed by these beers, and on their own in a pub, and particularly with Indian food, because with Indian food, the most popular drink is lager beer. Why? Because you're eating spicy food and you want something cold and refreshing. The lager was cold, but refreshing, no, it's bloating. And bloating lager with spicy food was uncomfortable. So an English friend of mine introduced me to real ale, which I absolutely love to this day. But I found that I couldn't drink ale with food, let alone with Indian food. And that's when this idea evolved. It was not a eureka moment. I did not go running naked through the streets of Cambridge, jumping out of bath. It was an idea that evolved. Why don't I produce a beer in India? I wanted to bring in Indian beer. Beer in India that has the refreshment of a lager and the smoothness of an ale combined. That was a very simple idea.
But how did you go about doing that? I mean, because it's not simply having an idea. You have to have recipes. You have to have the infrastructure, the equipment. You have to have master brewers. So what was that process? And I guess related to that, I guess it's a question about why you chose, at least initially, to do this in India, and only later did you bring it here.
So. And ideas are one thing and action is another thing. I have lots of idea wallahs sitting in their armchairs. How many of them actually put them into place? and into action, and it is difficult. And I think first thing is you've got to make that leap in deciding into going into business. So in my case, with a commerce degree, a law degree, a qualified chartered accountant, I should have become a banker. You know, mergers and acquisition or corporate finance, that would have been the ideal route, given that I decided I didn't want to be an accountant, I didn't want to be a lawyer. But I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Now, to take that risk, that leap is the first decision.
Yeah.
And I was 26 years old when I made this decision. I had no family, no mortgages, no commitments. I had nothing to lose. And I had my education behind me. So I had that to fall back on. I could always get a job as an accountant. And then I teamed up with a business partner who was a childhood friend from India. And I think you can't do it alone. Without him, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Without Arjun Reddy.
Yeah.
And we sort of lived and worked together. First we tried to do it part-time. We started with the polo sticks, and then we sold them to Harrods and Lily White's.
Yes.
But once we started working on the beer, I had to put everything else aside. And then a lot of luck comes into it. By the way, luck is something they never teach you about at business school. There are no case studies on luck. And my best definition of luck is when determination meets opportunity. Because if you're determined, you'll see the opportunity. Otherwise, the opportunities pass you by. Yeah. And so we got a chance introduction to the biggest independent brewery in India, in Bangalore, Mysore Breweries, through our mentor, my business partner's uncle. So having a mentor is really important. Having luck is very important. And then this brewery in India was not only the biggest independent brewery in India, they never exported beer before. They didn't have a suitable brand to export. One of the best-selling brands was called Pals, which is the name for dog food here. And their best-selling brand was a beer called Knockout, which was 8% strength with one boxer having knocked out another boxer playing. So that was not what we're looking for. And they didn't have the liquid. We're looking for this combination of a lager and an ale. But they had the best brewmaster in India, who was young, dynamic, had a PhD in brewing. They're scientists. From Prague in the Czech Republic, the home of Pilsner beer. He spent 6 years in Prague. So he knew everything about beer, and he was a brilliant brewer. So I teamed up with him, went back to India with hand luggage full of, in those days you could carry liquid in your hand luggage, 30 bottles of carefully selected beers, and I sat in the laboratory and tasted these beers with him and said, this is what I like about this beer, this is what I don't like about this beer. This tried to convey this taste and texture that I had in my mind, and that's how we started. We created from scratch.
What stage did you move the business from India to here? I know it's all over the world now in different places, but at some stage you made that really crucial decision to bring it here. Why did you make that decision?
My partner and I lived and worked together. I mean, it was really tough. And I met Heather, my wife, who was here a year after we started. So she saw those early days when we lived in a roof conversion in the Fulham Palace Road, and it was really difficult driving around a battered old car, going door to door to the restaurant selling the beer. And 5 years of struggle trying to get this brand to take off, and my business partner left. He didn't believe the plane would take off. I bought him out on his terms, and the year after he left, our sales doubled. Not because he left. he left, and I did a few things in terms of building a team and putting a bit into marketing, and the sales literally doubled in a year. But the brewery in India couldn't cope.
Yeah.
It was already a very special product. The Cobra recipe is what people don't understand about with beers. I mean, any Germans in this room? No? Any Germans? Yes, okay. Germans, very strict laws about brewing. Strict German beer is just malted barley, yeast, water, and hops. That's it. Well, with Cobra, to achieve this smooth taste and this texture, it's all that, plus we have 4 varieties of hops, and wheat, and rice, and maize, and it's a very complicated. And the brewery in India, making Pals and Knockout, this very special product, was by now hundreds of containers a year. And they were slipping up with quality, consistency, containers not arriving. So I then had to make the decision to move the production to the UK, which is a very difficult decision. My consumers gave me the answer. We moved the production to the UK from Bangalore to Bedford, and never looked back.
And it didn't make any difference to your consumers that it was no longer being made in India. Is that the case?
Well, we researched very carefully with the consumers, and because I didn't want to do it. My distributors said, if you brew here, we'll not buy from you.
Okay.
My view was, you will buy from me if my consumers want the beer. So I ignored them. And I went straight to the consumer and asked the consumer, I said, what is important to you? And we always did surveys with the consumers. And I asked them to rank in order of importance. Was it the fact that it was brewed to an authentic Indian recipe? Was it the fact that it was a premium beer? Was it the fact, the extra smooth taste? Was it the fact that it was imported from India? And the most important thing to the consumer was the extra smooth, less gassy taste. And the least important thing to the consumer, by a long shot, was the fact that it was imported from India. So that gave me the confidence. And you think about it logically, how many of you here eat Indian food regularly, love Indian food? That would be just about every hand, yeah? Do you expect it to be cooked in Delhi and flown over here? You know, we get some of the best Indian food in the world right here in London.
I'm really interested in kind of the way you run the business. And I think I mean this in two senses. The first sense is the question of delegation. Because as you say, you were both chief executive and financial director until as late as 2001. So the question, can you just say a little bit about delegation in terms of the business? But the other thing I was really interested in when I was reading your book is this kind of family model that you have. You say here, the idea of the family is at the heart of the Cobra business. It runs through all the company's interactions with people, advisors, mentors, customers, employees and associates. They are all part of the extended family. So there's two things. Can you just tell us a bit about it?
Well, one of the most important things when you start a business is that it's usually two people. And in our case, two people. We had to do everything. We had to look after the production of beer, import it, distribute it, telesales, field sales, marketing, keeping the books, the whole lot. So what is good is I now have a joint venture with a global multinational of over 10,000 people around the world, 2,000 people in the UK. But whenever I go around a brewery or whatever I'm with the team, I've done what every one of them has done myself, which really helps. It's a huge advantage. But as the business grows, you've got to build a team. And as you build a team, you've got to delegate. And delegation is an art. It's not as simple as just finding people and getting them to do it. There's the delegating, there's the monitoring, there's the supervising, there's the following up. So that whole art of delegation. Again, I was very lucky I saw that my father at a very large scale. So I had that advantage. But then there's, you make the mistakes as well. You hire the wrong people sometimes. So the biggest mistakes, if you ask me some of the biggest mistakes I've made in my life, one of them was hiring the wrong chief executive. It nearly cost me everything. So that's why delegation is not easy and not simple. And the family atmosphere linked to that is, as we grew, we realized that we would need to leverage in terms of bringing in advice, because there were very few of us. So how could we get people to advise us, but treat us more than just a client? And more than us and them. So a good example is Grant Thornton, the accountants. We started working them very early. So we tried to raise finance. It was very difficult raising finance. We had zero credibility. We found Grant Thornton, Anu Chande, the partner we work with, who to this day is one of my best friends. Without him, we wouldn't be here. When the financial proposal was on Grant Thornton letterhead, it just added credibility. So then we embraced Grant Thornton as part of our family. When we took on advertising agencies, the first advertising agency was Saatchi & Saatchi. So I went for the best, cost more, get what you pay for. PR, we'd use the best PR agencies. Design, we'd use the best design agencies. And the Cobra AGMs, for a little company, our AGMs would be packed. Because we wouldn't just invite our shareholders, we'd invite all our advisors. And I remember once overhearing a senior member of the advertising industry, senior designer, saying, I've never been to a client AGM before in my life. It's the first time I've ever been to one. So that's bringing them as part of the family.
Really enjoyed, pleased the fact that you brought up the idea of advertising the product, because of course I remember that wonderful advert that you had, I am David, I am a Coe-holic, with the paper bag over his head and the cut-out eyes, which was one of the most successful advertisement campaigns. I mean, over half the people in the country knew about it, and nearly everyone really, really loved it. And actually, earlier today, I was watching one of your more recent ones, I'm the Boss, or something like that, which is absolutely fantastic and sexy, really, really important. But I guess what you started with a few minutes ago, which I just want to pull you back to, is this idea of, well, sometimes you make mistakes. I wonder if you can just tell us, just one or two times when you faced major obstacles. I mean, I know in 2009 or 10 you went into administration. How do you come back from something like that? I mean, what do you do when something goes terribly wrong?
We have nearly lost the business 3 times.
3.
3 major times. I mean, in the early days, we'd run out of money all the time. So, I mean, if we say losing a business, we're losing it almost every day.
Yeah.
And having to raise the money was really tough. But the 3 major occasions, the lessons I learned, one is when you have so Harold Macmillan saying, events, dear boy, events. So you can plan everything you want to plan, and things happen. Things happen that you do not predict. And it's always important as an organization to conduct a risk analysis. I sit on audit committees of large companies. Booker, I'm the senior independent director of Booker, the largest wholesaler in Britain. It's a £5 billion company, 13,000 employees. We do a lot of risk analysis, but things happen that you do not predict. And you can say, well, if this risk happens, this is how I'll mitigate it. You can do that as much as you want. But at the first time I nearly lost my business was when I started a trade magazine called Tandoori. And there was no trade magazine for the Indian restaurant sector. Think about it, there are over 10,000 Indian restaurants, and the biggest chain of Indian restaurants is 16. And that's exceptional. The next biggest is 14, and the next biggest after that is about 3. Because they tend to be owner managed.
Yeah.
And they're spread out all over, in every high street, in every village, in every corner of Britain. How do you reach out to them? In the early days, mail shots were a nuisance because A, they were expensive, cumbersome. People throw mail shots in the bin. We said, let's advertise in the trade magazine for Indian restaurants. Well, there wasn't one, so I started one. And Tandoori exists to this day, and that was great because every month we could communicate with the restaurants, and everyone else could as well. And in the end, in the beginning, I remember Heather used to help me proofread the copies. Do you remember the proofreading Tandoori magazine? So then I became a Rupert Murdoch. I didn't know what my publications were writing. And the editor used to run the publication. And it was a separate office, nothing to do with Cobra. And one day he came running down in February 1998. In fact, when this campaign he was speaking about was on. He said, Karan, have you seen Tandoori is all over the news? Why should Tandoori be in the news? It's a trade magazine. No, it's this article I wrote about service in Indian restaurants. And the article on service in Indian restaurants, he meant to be constructive, but he insulted the industry. And he called the waiters miserable. He said they were miserable because the managers and owners didn't incentivize them enough. And the industry was up in arms. They were burning Tandoori magazine in the streets. He received 10 death threats. I mean, it was really very serious. And in the end, they said, well, it's a free circulation magazine. We can burn as many copies as we want. They'll still post an issue to us next month. Then they said, oh, that Karan Bilimoria, Cobra Beer, he owns half the magazine. We'll boycott Cobra Beer. So they boycotted Cobra Beer. There were press gangs going around restaurant to restaurant saying, boycott Cobra Beer. And my team was saying, what did we do wrong? We didn't. This is the editor of the magazine has written. Why are we suffering? Cobra's done nothing. Now, can you imagine? At that stage, we had opened up depots in Leeds, in Manchester, in Birmingham, in Edinburgh. We'd hired vans. We'd hired telesales in each of theirs, field sales. We're up to about 150 people. We were flying. We were growing at 70% a year, 70 a year on year. We reached the fastest growing companies in Britain. And suddenly, you're stopped in your tracks by something you couldn't predict. What do you do? And I have the sayings, you adapt or you die. And we adapted. We had to literally cut down from 150 people to 17. We closed down all the depots, sold all the vans, and it was horrible. And then we had to go around to the restaurants, literally restaurant by restaurant, saying, we are innocent, we would not harm our own customers. And it took 1 year, including the Office of Fair Trading getting involved, when the boycott was lifted. And the thing was, not only did we survive, we grew it by 3%. But where was 70% and where was 3%? So that was awful, and we got through it. The last time when you spoke about the 2009, that was a financial crisis. And that is when I'd made the mistake of taking on the wrong team. And that was quite apparent. I tried to raise money, which I managed to do to keep the business going, but I had raised money from a hedge fund. And the hedge fund, after the financial crisis, a $26 billion American hedge fund, their market capitalization went down to $350 million. They pulled in all their investments and they forced us to sell the business. And that was under the worst circumstances in the autumn of 2008, after Lehman's went bust, to have to sell our business. And in the end, we found Molson Coors as a joint venture partner not to sell the business. And we were about to do a restructuring of the business, and one of our creditors pulled the rug. We then had to go into a pre-pack administration, which was the only alternative. And at that stage, we could have lost the business because anyone could have outbid us. And it was open for anyone to bid to buy the business. And we then managed to outbid everyone. PwC ran it totally above board, and we won the business back. So we technically went into administration for a few seconds, but we won the bid to save the business. And I managed to do it in a way where I've looked after all my employees, past and present, all my shareholders, all the secured creditors, and over the course of the joint venture, I'm actually paying off unsecured creditors as well. So that was another time I nearly lost everything.
Oh, it's scary. While you were talking, I keep thinking we ought to be interviewing Heather as well. I'm going to move, though, onto ideas about education, higher education, because, of course, you're sitting in a room full of educators and, in some senses. So, entrepreneurs is really at the heart of higher education policy right now. What do you think can be done by universities to improve entrepreneurship and our new entrepreneurs?
Well, I was chairing a higher education conference just recently on entrepreneurship in universities, and the thing is, a lot is happening now. I remember when I was at Cambridge, we had something called the Industrial Society. It sounds Victorian. Now the biggest student society at Cambridge is the Cambridge Entrepreneurs. At Oxford, the Oxford Entrepreneurs is one of the biggest societies at Oxford. It's so popular, and entrepreneurship is now available to every student in the university, not just the business school. I mean, there wasn't the Judge Business School, which I sit on the board of, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. Harvard Business School was founded in 1908. So, we're behind the curve, but we've started and we're catching up. The London Business School is now, part of London University, is now one of the top business schools in the world. So we've come a long way. Entrepreneurship, which 2 or 3 decades ago when I came as a student from India, was looked down upon. Entrepreneurship, second-hand car salesman, Del boy. Now entrepreneurship is celebrated. And that changed in the 80s when the Richard Bransons of this world started to, and I think they've been very inspiring. And within universities, entrepreneurship is now being taught as well. So you have lots of initiatives, and I use Cambridge as an example, Enterprise Tuesday, where every Tuesday in term time, open to anyone in the university community, not even necessarily at the university, to come and learn about entrepreneurship. So you learn about raising finance, you learn about marketing, you learn about a business plan, and you get speakers coming in to talk to you, and then you network, and you come out with a certificate having attended the course, and you can enter a competition, and you can raise money to even start a business. Wow, that didn't exist. The Centre for Entrepreneurial Learning at Cambridge didn't exist before. There's a diploma in entrepreneurship. At Cranfield, they have the Business Growth Program. There's just endless initiatives now at universities. And then there's a commercializing of ideas from research into business that is also happening as well. So it's very exciting.
I mean, you're very much a fan of lifelong learning. You speak in great eloquence about its importance in your own life, but also in its life of everyone else. And certainly Birkbeck, I mean, we have students who come straight from our school, but we also have people who are coming from quite established businesses in their 30s, 40s, even 50s. What do you think? Do you think there's any difference? Do you think that in those types of students, do you think that students who come with practical experience as businessmen already in their own right, do you think that gives them an edge? Do you think what do you think about that?
Well, there's a famous saying of President Clinton's that the more you learn, the more you earn. And the lifelong learning part of it, if you are a chartered accountant, you've got to do continuing professional development.
Yeah.
And you've got to sign off every year as a fellow. I've got to sign off that I'm continuing my professional development. So that's in a profession. But in other people, normally they think I've done my degree, that's it. And I'm sorry, I think in universities as well as in schools, teachers do not go through enough lifelong learning.
Yep.
University professors, I'm sorry, do not go through enough lifelong learning. And I found it very beneficial when it started when I went on the Cranfield Business Growth Program, which is a mini MBA tailored to business. And there every participant was a fellow, chief executive, founder, entrepreneur. And of small companies, when I did it many years ago. That changed my life because I was taken out of my business, and I literally in the classes, I would have a notepad with me. Two notepads. One was taking notes of the actual class, another one was taking ideas back for my business. And I'd go back to my business just full of ideas because I was out of it, and lots of ideas from my classmates. So that was brilliant. Then I went on to do a program at the London Business School, and then I went on to do a program at the Harvard Business School. And the Harvard Business School one took 9 years. I'm a slow learner. So at the end of the 9 years, after I graduated from it, became an alumnus, I've gone back 4 years for refreshers because the course changes every year. It's contemporary. And I keep learning.
Yeah.
And people say, what, you go to learn? But, aren't you too busy? And you prepare for it, and the time you're there, and the follow-up. I love it.
You're now Chancellor at the University of Birmingham. What do you plan to do in that role? What do you see as your goals while you're there?
Well, I've been the Chancellor for exactly 1 year now, and it's been a great privilege.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful Russell Group university. It's big, so over 30,000 students. Fortunately, it's well off. It's a $1 billion business. It makes very healthy surpluses that are plowed back. It's got a huge infrastructure program. I think at the moment there's a £500 million over the next 5 years. New library, new sports centre, new dental school, new residences. It's just really doing well. But so you say, well, what can I do to that? And it's a great example of leadership. And I've seen this time and again that the reason why Birmingham is doing so well is because we have a brilliant Vice Chancellor, Professor David Eastwood, who, Master, I'm sure you know, who was head of HEFKE and was Vice Chancellor of East Anglia before that. He is brilliant. It's his leadership that is delivering, with a great team that he's built around him, this phenomenal result of this university that's just going from strength to strength to strength. It's now top 20. What's the bet if he stays 10 years? He's been there 6 years, stays there 10 years, it'll be top 10. And I've seen this at schools. Anthony Selden, who was Master of Wellington College, where our older daughter is, when he went to Wellington College, he's just left, 10 years ago, it was 250th in the rankings of schools in this country. It's now 25th. And again, it's all down to his leadership. So when you've got a well-run institution with great leadership, as a Chancellor, one of my main roles is being an ambassador for the institution. And I love that, and that's great. And then you can try and add to that success in whatever way you can. So one example is I said we're focusing on research, which is crucial, but teaching. We need to focus on teaching excellence. So this year, for the first time, we've had in each of the schools, in each of the major faculties, we've had the Teacher of the Year award that is presented at a graduation ceremony. And the Teacher of the Year in each of those is nominated by the students. And when you read the citations of these teachers that have won the Teacher of the Year award, you see why they've won it. Because you see that they're doing things outside the extraordinary. They just bring more material in. They think outside the box. They make the classes engaging and exciting. There's one who I presented in one of the degree ceremonies who's an anatomy teacher. And the way he brings anatomy to life, if you read the citation, it's just inspirational. And you can see why he won. And so we've now got that teaching excellence, which is an idea that I suggested, that we should focus on teaching. So it's that little bit of a difference one can try and make.
Yeah. I was really struck by something in your book here, where you talk about the importance of diversity. And it's a great book, by the way. I've learned such a lot
Thank
from
you.
it. I love your tips, your business tips. But you make a lot, you say a lot here about the importance of diversity, the way that diversity actually strengthens businesses, and you refer to your own management team as a mini United Nations. Can you just say a little bit more about the importance of diversity? And that's the first question. The second thing I'd like to hear more about is what you don't talk about, and that is about gender diversity. Because you do say how privileged you are that the glass ceiling in Britain is no longer there. But to what extent is that really the case for women in the society? So two things, ethnic diversity and also gender diversity.
Well, with the gender diversity part, if I talk about that, it is an issue. On the Booker board, we have not one member of the executive team is a woman, yet two of our non-executives are women. Now, for a FTSE 250 company, we're actually having two women on our board is better than many. Chief executives of FTSE companies, hardly any women. Hardly, and you count them less, on a FTSE 100, less than one hand. YPO, the Young Presidents Organization that I'm a member of, which is the leading network of chief executives around the world, it's an outstanding institution, it's changed my life. We try our best to get more women members, and we are getting more. At this Harvard Business School course that I'm talking about, when I first went on it, there were, in one section of 90, we'd have 1 or 2 women. Today it's 20%, 25%. So it's really improving. And I think it's something we just got to keep working on. Helena Morrissey, who was a contemporary of mine from Cambridge, she's really working hard at getting more women on the boards of companies. And again, I think we're making a lot of progress, but we need to do a lot more, is what I can say. In terms of general diversity, I found without a doubt that diversity just enriches an organization, enriches decision making, the diversity of mindsets, the diversity of backgrounds, the diversity of thinking. It just makes it so much better, any decision you make, anything you're going to do. And I saw that at Cobra. And the way people just, and again, it's a family. We have Cobra reunions now of people no longer working at Cobra, organized by the former Cobra employees. Once, twice a year.
They just want to drink some more beer. Excellent.
They drink beer as well. but so the diversity I found is very effective. And in an academic world, this is why I've now taken over as the president of the UK Council for International Student Affairs, because I feel very strongly that this government has got it absolutely wrong on international students.
Yeah.
Theresa May is, I'm sorry, she's economically illiterate when it comes to higher education and students. And she's damaging our country, damaging our reputation. Today I was hosting a group of young Indian MPs, and the question they wanted to ask me is, why are they doing this? Don't they want us? It's sending out such a horrible message around the world. The number of Indian students has gone down by 50%. And I fought in 2007 to get international students to be able, in Parliament, to be able to stay on and work for 2 years after they graduated. That 2-year post-graduation work visa was wonderful. I know as an international student myself here how expensive it is to study here, how much it would help to be able to work for 2 years to help pay for some of that, to gain more work experience, to build those bridges even further. When you poll the public, shows Theresa May is completely out of tune with the public. 75% of the public feel that international students should be allowed to stay on and work afterwards. So she's not even in tune with the public. So I think the diversity of students make our universities what they are, and the diversity of academics. The top universities, Oxford, Cambridge, even at Birmingham, 30% of our academics are foreign academics. Who is the next president of the Royal Society? But congratulations on your fellowship. It's a big thing, but as a scientist, of course, being a fellow of the Royal Society is the ultimate. The next president of the Royal Society is Sir Venki Ramakrishna. Trinity College, Cambridge, Nobel Prize winner. First Indian to become president of the Royal Society. Do we want to lose somebody like that? We should be attracting them. And they're going to America. You try and fight with Harvard. I'm now an alumnus there. And we had the president of Harvard talk to the alumni here in Guildhall, 1,000 of us in the Guildhall. You know what she said? She said, if I want an academic, and one of my faculty says, I want this particular academic sitting in Australia or wherever in the world, I pick up the phone and I said, it's the president of Harvard speaking, we want you. What does it take to get you? How much do I have to pay you? Okay, your family you've got, I'll sort it out. Your children's good, I'll sort it out. And when you're in that position, when you've got $30 billion sitting in your bank, that's what we're competing with. And instead, Theresa May is making it worse for us to compete with that.
One more question, then I'm going to open it up for people here to ask anything they want to. So just very, very briefly, while everyone's trying to think of what they want to say, if you were going to do something different, what would it be? What would you do differently? If you know what you know now.
Well, you look back and you think, would I have rather done management consulting instead of chartered accountancy? I wouldn't have had to do those nightmarish exams. There are little things like that you look back on. One of the things I regret, I'm lucky to have honorary doctorates, but I regret not having done a proper doctorate. But I believe it may not be too late.
Even in history.
I have sort of, it's those sort of things that I could have done differently. And yes, I do think in terms of, one of my favorite sayings is, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. So you've got to make those mistakes and learn from them. And I've made all these mistakes. I shared a couple of them with you. And yes, should I have hired a better person? Yeah, but I did. You've got to learn from it.
Excellent. Look, we've got a few minutes here for you people to talk. Who would like to start us off? Yes.
What would you say to a person who's gone down the
Could it be really good if you give me your name and tell me what you do?
Sorry, my name is Matthew Jackson. I am a corporate partner consultant for the university. What would you say to a failing entrepreneur? I'm talking in particular with my housemate. He started a microbrewery and he's been doing it for 2 years. He's made a living out of it for 2 years, but he's at the point now when he's got to sell it and get a job. What would you say to someone like that?
Well, first thing I'd say is well done and trying, because that whole experience of just doing it. And I love these microbreweries. I've gone to visit quite a few of them. With Cobra, by the way, my decision from the beginning was very clear. I didn't want to be in that situation because I knew for a beer brand to be successful, you need to have critical mass. I knew I'd have to sell millions of cases, not just millions of bottles, to make it a viable business. And I had a vision to grow a global business. But not everyone wants to build a huge business. Somebody would much rather maybe build a smaller business. In a business school class, I asked people, they all want to start their businesses. I said, okay, how many of you want to start a small business? Quite a few hands go up. How many of you people want to start a middle-sized business? Quite a few hands go up. How many want to start a multi-billion-dollar global business? You get a couple of hands going up. So not everyone wants to start a big global business. But this, wanting to do it, following that passion and having a go, the only thing is, yes, if he wants to go and get a job, fine, but he could also try and do something else, because that learning of being an entrepreneur, what he's learned in those 2 years, those are transferable skills to starting another business. So I would think of that rather than maybe just going straight back to a job, or maybe going for a job temporarily, but thinking of the next idea. If you really just want to give up.
Someone over there and then, yeah.
Hi, I'm Annette McCone and I work with the Whiteman Participation Team and also work with the Business School to support students who are interested in enterprise and entrepreneurship. And I was very, very fortunate to come to that conference which you chaired. And at that you talked about your social enterprise, and you talked just now about you're a problem solver, and when you identify a problem, you come up with a solution. And what was it about when you realised that you'd identified this problem and you were in a position to give something back, and just to say more about the social entrepreneurship that you do?
Okay.
Very important. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a saying. It's a bit corny, but I'll say it. That it's not just good enough to be the best in the world. You've also got to be the best for the world. And it's so important. I come from a very small, one of the smallest communities in the world, the Zoroastrian Parsi community. There are literally 69,000 of us in India. And in the whole world, there are barely 100,000 Zoroastrian Parsis. And yet it is one of the, in per capita of achievement, it's the most successful community in the world by far. So Tatas, Jaguar Land Rover, that's a Parsi company. Zubin Mehta, the conductor. Freddie Mercury of Queen. I mean, I could just go on. And in India, you go to India, a country of 1.25 billion people, and you say you're Parsi, everyone knows who a Parsi is. But the thing that's most special about the Parsis is Mahatma Gandhi's saying, Mahatma Gandhi was, his mentor was a Parsi, who was the first Indian MP in 1892, Dadabhai Naoroji. And Mahatma Gandhi says, about the Parsis, in numbers beneath contempt, in contribution beyond compare. And the contribution was not just contribution in success and achievement in every profession and an industry and everything they done, but in putting back. And not just looking after their own, but putting back into the wider community. Tatas to this day, Ratan Tata, the chairman emeritus, he doesn't even own 1% of Tatas. Okay, that's still a lot. but 66% is owned by charitable trusts. All those profits go back. I'm a Tata scholar. That's how I raised some of the money to come and study in this country. So that benevolence is what is so crucial. Now, no people, this forcing companies to do it, I don't think is the right way. It's got to come from within you. So from day one, we would donate beer to fundraising causes. So we find a fundraising event, we say, here, have some beer, serve it to for the fundraising. Now that helped us because people will be tasting our beer, but it saved them money and it helped them raise money. So we found this was great. I mean, we do it to this day. The Lord Mayor has a curry lunch every year in the Guildhall, over 1,000 people. We raise £150,000 net. Heather's on the committee. We're £150,000 net. Tell me if I'm exaggerating, but I don't think I am. And it's raised over £1 million since it started for the Army Benevolent Fund, for the Soldiers' Charity. And Cobra's given the beer for that every year. Now that's thousands of pounds of the beer every year. House of Lords, House of Commons, we have a lot of competition. We call it the other place. And one of the biggest competition is the tug of war. And the tug of war is an event attended by over 600 people, and it's organized by Macmillan's Cancer. And we raise, again, in recessionary times, raising 120, 140,000 pounds net for Macmillan's Cancer every year. Cobra Beer provides the beer every year for that event. So we've donated millions of pounds worth of beer over the years to help hundreds of charities, and it's great.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tricia King. I'm part of the leadership team here at Birkbeck. The first thing we need to say to you is it's never too late to do your doctorate. Imagine who you might meet in this organization. Take that early back into your organisation. So that's the sales pitch from me. But the second is that I read an article that you wrote a couple of weeks ago where you used the Benjamin Franklin quote, and I've just found it. It says, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. And I was very taken with it a couple of weeks ago. And I'm curious about how you would persuade people like Theresa May and Jo Johnson. So Theresa May seems intent on ruling out international recruitment, as you described. Jo Johnson just come into post in a government where you think, what are they going to do to higher education? But what is it we can do with those people to persuade them of the validity of what Benjamin Franklin said back in 1758?
They just don't get it. And not Joe, by the way, not Joe. Joe is on side. He's generally on side. David Willits was definitely on side. And I know with David Willits, now that he's not in office, I can say this openly, he would despair. But a lot of it is controlled by the Treasury, and in this case, the Home Office. And if I speak to cabinet ministers, I hear from them their internal battles with Theresa May, saying, look, actually, it was going to be worse. I'm persuaded her to do less. I mean, she literally is, one of them, she's on a rampage, is the words of a cabinet minister. So they have their internal, but as long as you know we've got the university's minister on side of higher education, that's important, and we should be grateful for that. But as a country, we underinvest in higher education. As a percentage of GDP, we are half that of America. We are less than the OECD average. We are less than the EU average. And yet we produce the best universities in the world along with America. Just imagine if we matched the level of spending as a percentage of GDP that the Americans do. Wow, what we could achieve. And just we talk about productivity. One of the key drivers of productivity is education. And they talk about apprenticeships, absolutely fine. Good, we should do that. We've got things like studio schools, which I'm an ambassador of, which are great initiatives, university technical colleges, great initiatives, but not at the expense of higher education. Higher education drives it all. It's the key driver of productivity, and we underinvest in it. And if you look at the bigger picture, we spend £140 billion on the NHS, which we need to spend on. Actually, we could spend more if it was spent efficiently. On welfare, we are 1% of the world's population, and we spend 7% of the world's welfare. The European Union, 7% of the world's population, 25% of the world's GDP, 50% of the world's welfare. Unsustainable. So we've got to get more efficient in terms of how we spend public money, but the higher education is penny wise, pound foolish. If we put more into higher education, the payoff will be huge. It won't happen overnight, but the payoff within 10 years will be huge. And linked to that is R&D and innovation. We spend way under US average, EU average, OECD average on research and development and innovation. We spend less as a percent of GDP on innovation R&D than South Korea spends. We've got to up our game.
Lord Trevor Williams, you sit on the ICAW. So I don't know if you made
Good to see you.
This morning, yes.
Sorry, I was in Liverpool visiting a new brewery.
The question I had, and there's many questions, but one I had for you, I think, is around how do you build a good team? How do you deal with the inherent contradiction of a family business, but yet one which allows other people to have a big say as well? They seem inherently contradictory because many firms suffer from being started by one person in the family, but as to transition to being much more open and democratic to others.
There's a good example in my joint venture partners, Malts and Coors. Coors are American brewers, the number 2 beer brand in America. Molson are big Canadian brewers, and they joined together. Now, Molson are as old as the United States of America. They were founded around the time of the American independence, over 200 years ago. Coors are over 100 years old. To this day, those two families who joined together a few years ago, they control this New York Stock Exchange listed company. And the chairman alternates. Every 2 years it's a Molson, every 2 years it's a Coors. And those family values and principles that have enabled these two families to prosper over centuries permeates through the whole organization, although it's run by professionals. And I see that, and it works really well when you can do it and have those values permeate through the organization with professionals running it. In our case, I realized with the team, building the team, the most important thing of building a team was finding the people with the right attitude and the right values. And culture is not something that you can switch on and off. Culture is not something you can buy. Culture is something that you build. And that, what you read in the book, that family atmosphere of Cobra when we were an independent company was just phenomenal. But the values were always there, and that's what got us through each one of our problems were our values. And that culture that we had. And the attitude, where we're always willing to go that extra mile. And people like Samson Sohail, who I've got with me. Samson, I've known Samson almost as long as I've known you, Heather. And I wouldn't be where I am without you, and I wouldn't be where I am without Samson. You know, this chap came, answered an ad on the Evening Standard. We were looking for our first we had 2 salespeople, looking for 2 more salespeople. And we could only hire 2 more. And this chap came third. Ad in the Evening Standard. And he said, please give me the job. I desperately want this job. And we said, look, sorry, we can only afford 2. He said, no, I'll do it for commission only. So I looked at Arjun and I said, what have we got to lose? Yeah, commission only. And then he said, have you got a car? I said, no. He said, just give me some samples. His English was terrible. He'd come over from Pakistan as a Pakistani Christian on asylum. He was working in an off license in the East End. But he had something in him, that attitude. Before he set off with these samples, he said, just tell me, these other 2, what's their target? He said, 100 cases of Cobra to be sold in a week. How long are you giving them to achieve the target? We said, 1 month. He achieved the target within 2 weeks. So we made him permanent. A couple of weeks later, Heather and I were living on a roof conversion, on the King's Road in Chelsea. So we're going out for dinner at 9 o'clock in the evening. and the sitting room, dining room all converted into the office. Heather would clamber up past cases of beer. And 9 o'clock, Samson was still on the phone. What are you doing here, Samson? Go home. It's 9 o'clock. No, I'm on call number 26. I've set myself a target this evening of 32 calls. When I get to 32, I'll let myself out. It's that attitude. You know, without him, I would not be here today. He has stood by me through all our ups and downs. And he is now a legend. Everyone in the Indian restaurant industry knows Samson. And he knows everybody. And I've been lucky to have people like him.
I think on that note, thank you very, very much. Are we allowed to open one of these now? Would you like a beer?
Don't let me open it for you.
Whoa, step back up, there we go.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much for this really enlightening talk. Can we give a round of applause?
Yes, I think the applause says it all. We've been really thrilled, entertained, educated, every adjective possible. I'm Kevin Ide, and I head the management department. And it's really a pleasure to thank you on behalf of the department for being part of this great evening. There is no doubt that this is a fantastic addition to the Lord Marshall series of lectures. As the Master did mention, we've had Willie Walsh, we've had Lord Bernstein, the FA chairman, and now we have Lord Bilimoria. And this is a fantastic one that is going to live long in the memory. I think that this conversation format has worked a treat, and we thank you for being very forthright, very open, very engaging. We've learned a great deal in many respects. Your celebrated career as an entrepreneur that continues to thrive and prosper and grow from strength to strength. We've also learned, you're a product of a business school, and we've seen what business schools can do, the quality of intellect and experience and knowledge base that can come out of that school, come out of business schools, particularly when when blended and complemented with practical business experience and business knowledge. So I think that is there are people who are considering MBA or getting involved in master's education. This is an excellent advertisement of what can come out of it. So thanks for that. But we've also learned about your experience and your contribution in terms of the higher education sector, which continues again, at Birmingham and elsewhere. And the passion with which you've spoken out for the sector, your interactions with cabinet ministers and in putting that case for universities, for the sector in general. So we thank you for all of that. We're very pleased that you found time to be here with us. I would like to extend that time to Lady Bilimoria as well. Thanks for the support. Apparently this has been going on now for several decades. So thanks for that. I would also like to extend our appreciation to Professor Buck, our college orator. You see why she's what she is. So thanks very much. It takes two to tango, and no doubt it's been a fantastic tango. And as I said, we've all enjoyed a treat of a discussion. So thanks very much, Joanna. And I would also, there are our guests here. All of you found time to come in here to be part of this discussion. This is very much appreciated by the department and by the college. Thanks for finding time to grace this occasion and for the questions, for the insightful questions that have been asked. Really appreciate all that. A lot of time and effort went into organizing these evening, and the venue in which we are having it. This is Keynes Room, and we know what John Maynard Keynes stand for as far as our civilization and modern economy is about. So everything from the venue of the event to the invitation to delegates to attracting such a high-profile industry leader as Lord Bilimoria, and so on and so forth. So Matthew and his team, Rose, thanks very much. We're also very grateful to our Dean, Professor Powell, but also the Master for being part of the Trish and her team, the external relations. So thanks very much for pulling together to make this evening a very wonderful occasion, also a very educational one. And I'm sure that I must, there are bound to be people I'll forget. The Lord Marshall family is not here, but we know that they are with us here in spirit, being very, very distinguished supporters of this series of lectures. I recall, interacting with them last year, and I know that hopefully next year we will see them again continue to lend the name of Lord Marshall, who really was a major stalwart, a captain of industry in the true sense of that word, and also an international one at that. So we extend our best wishes to Lady Marshall, who apparently is feeling a bit under the weather. I think that's all I've got to say, except to draw our attention to what happens next, which is that the evening is still young, there is dinner and there are drinks to be had. And please, if you're going for the dinner, Rose Divani, Rose is the person to follow. She'll be about to guide us to the council chambers. And if you're coming for drinks, Matthew is the person to, so he'll be very much available to also lead us to where we need to be. All right, and with that, I'd just like to say thanks and
Thank
God
you.
bless.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Could I just break with protocol? I know we've got to be out here in a couple of minutes, but I just want to thank you very much for chairing that so well, and thank you for those very kind words. What I really want to just say, if I may, just take 2 minutes, is, which we didn't cover in our discussion, was about Colin Marshall, because I was very privileged to know him well. And what really set him apart, and some of you, how many of you here actually knew him or interacted with him? Just so a few, okay. Well, you will identify what I'm saying, and that what was special about him was not only his business success. He was hugely successful in what he achieved in his business, which we all benefit from this day. And when we fly BA regularly, it's all thanks to him. It's the way it is. But was his genuine human kindness and generosity of spirit. He was a mentor to me. From the time I joined the House of Lords 9 years ago, he took me under his wing and just showed me nothing but kindness. Always guiding me, always helping me. He didn't have to do it. He was very busy. He was doing all sorts of things. But he always had that time, and always in the nicest way. Not one person would ever have a bad word to say about him, and there are not many people. And you talk to the staff of the House of Lords, they're the most important people. You mentioned his name. Like today, one of our senior members of the House of Staff is retiring after 22 years. And I couldn't be at his farewell because I'm here. And when I told him why, Lord Marshall. It's Lord Marshall, special person. And he also had a great sense of humor. I remember once when, there's a story which I have to tell you, one of the big aviation entrepreneurs in India, if you've gone to India, there's an airline called Jet Airways. It's a very good airline. And Naresh Goyal always looked upon Colin Marshall as his mentor. And Naresh wanted to launch his first-class service between the UK and India. So I was chairing the UK-India Business Council, and we had this big event. And he had his first-class cabins there in the Mandarin Orchard Hotel, brilliant first-class cabins. And the chief guest was Colin Marshall. So when Colin Marshall was speaking, he said, I'm very honored to be Naresh's chief guest, and he calls me his mentor, but he never listens to me. He said, I keep telling him Naresh, what are you doing? You know, the best way to become a millionaire in the airline industry is to start as a billionaire. So he's a wonderful person, and I'm delighted that you're doing this in his memory, and his legacy and inspiration will live on forever. Thank you.